call the meeting of the Joint Economic Development Organization Board of Directors meeting to order for June the 18th, 2018. Madam Clerk, if we could start with a call to order.
Commissioner Bueller? Here. Commissioner Cook?
Here.
Commissioner Archer?
Here.
Mayor De La Isla? Here. Deputy Mayor Brinson?
Present.
Councilmember Padilla?
Here.
Councilmember Lesser?
Here.
Councilmember Hiller? Here. Councilmember Cleary? Councilmember Ortiz? Councilmember Emerson?
Here.
Councilmember Mays?
Here.
Councilmember Cohen?
Showing that we do have a quorum present for this evening's meeting. This is a specially called meeting after our last regular scheduled meeting due to follow up with issues from the last meeting as well as new issues that have arisen. And if we could begin with our first item.
Item 3, action item, approval of funding for Project Eagle.
Okay, good evening. I'm excited that we were able to get this item on the agenda for the special meeting. Project Eagle is a new business that is looking to locate in Shawnee County. Their primary business is containerizing and exporting commodities and grains. So they also were looking at some locations near the intermodal facility in Edgerton, and we were able to intercept that and have some communications with them to talk about what we could offer here in Topeka and Shawnee County. So the project that we're looking at with them is capital investment of up to $5 million with 16 new jobs over 5 years with an average wage of $60,000. So the wages there are pretty competitive, and we're proud about that. The incentives that we are recommending for approval tonight are within our guidelines, and they are incentives for jobs and for their capital investment. So as you can see on the slide there, $6,600 per job and $2,000 per $1 million invested for a total proposed incentive of up to $115,600. And as always, these are performance-based, so they would need to prove that they meet these thresholds to be able to earn the incentives to move forward. And let's see. So they haven't selected a final site. They're looking at 2 sites in Shawnee County right now. And one of the sites that they're looking at is pretty blighted and would be a great opportunity for us to reuse that land and bring it back up to its full potential. So I would stand for any questions about this project.
I know that we go through this periodically, but just for anybody watching or anybody in the public, just this process, they go through meeting with you. This would be an action approved by the Topeka Board of Directors before it comes to JEDO. And then our action tonight is on this incentive and whether or not we approve of this incentive. And then moving forward, if the company decides to go forward with the plan, it would come back to us?
Correct. The Topeka Board approved this incentive on the 1st, which was the last Topeka Board meeting that we had. And so once the decision is made by you all tonight, then I would communicate that back to the company, and we would work to draft a contract that outlines all of the details and then bring that contract back to the next JEDO meeting for your approval as well.
So this is not a guarantee that the company would go forward with this incentive, but this is our offer to them.
Correct. It's something that gives them some numbers to plug into their spreadsheets as they're comparing the cost of developing in different locations. And so the purpose of incentives is to help level the playing field or put Topeka and Shawnee County above the rest and bring us to the top of the list. So that's what we're trying to accomplish tonight.
Based on that, are there any questions regarding Project Eagle? Commissioner Archer?
Yes, can you tell us what the nature of the business is?
Yeah, so they are containerizing and exporting commodities and grain materials from the region. And so they will export to other countries that they already have relationships with. Some of those are in Asia, some in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Hiller?
With that, will they be using the airport or air
No,
service?
they will actually containerize them here and move them via container to the intermodal facility in Edgerton.
Okay.
And then from there, they'll go on rail to the port.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Lesser?
You said it was a new business?
Yes.
Is it as in a startup business?
It is, there is a business that already exists in Shawnee County and has existed for 15-plus years. And so this is an idea that is related to their current business, and it's a new business with new owners that is originated from the current business. So the partnerships that they have are already established within the export relationship and things like that. But it's a new business to Shawnee County and a new business all together.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Mayor Del Isla?
I would move for approval.
I'll second.
Motion for approval by Mayor Del Isla, second by Shawnee County Commissioner Bueller. If we could, with a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bueller?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yes.
Show that it passes. Our next item.
Item 4, action item, approval of land sale for Project Arrow.
Okay, this is a conversation we don't get to have very often. Project Arrow is a company that's currently located in Topeka and Shawnee County area. They are looking at purchasing 17 acres in the Central Crossing Commerce Park, which is the park where Home Depot and Bimbo and Target are located. They found that this site would be attractive for their business and be a better positioning of the type of business that they do. They are a brand that we would be proud to have in that park and would be in alignment with the rest of the uses there. So they are looking at 17 acres just north of Home Depot on the east side of Winger Road. They currently have 33 full-time employees, and they would retain those employees and obviously build their new facility there that would be up to the standards of the rest of the buildings within the park. So right now, we are talking about $10,000 per acre, which is the appraisal price that we have acquired from previous appraisals of that land. And so they have submitted a letter of interest, and what I am requesting tonight is just approval from you all to move forward with negotiating that transaction. And then wanted to have a discussion around the proceeds of that sale. So I would recommend that we use those proceeds to further extend the utilities within Central Crossing and create more shovel-ready land. Right now, the sewer line ends on Winger, and it needs to go up and make the curve onto 49th Street where we're doing the new road. We also have gas line extensions that need to happen there as well. So if we were able to set aside these funds for future extensions of those utilities, then that would help open up new land that's truly shovel-ready for future prospects.
Again, this was approved by Go Topeka Board before it came to us.
Correct.
How did we achieve the 10,000 per acre? You said it was by appraisal?
Yeah, it was appraised by a local appraiser here in town.
When was the last appraisal done?
The last appraisal, I don't know the date of the formal appraisal, but we did just check the valuation and had the same appraiser verify that amount was still valid last summer. So they didn't do a full appraisal again. We just had them check to make sure that the value was still the same and that it hadn't changed at all, and they verified that it still is 10,000.
So we're looking at an appraisal that's a year old, or reappraisal amount that it's a year old?
Correct.
And would we know if that valuation has changed in the last 12 months? I mean, is 10,000 on market, below market, above market?
I believe that that's pretty standard, if maybe a little bit aggressive for the area. You know, we did make sure that the appraiser knew about the 49th Street improvement and the substation there, so they took that into account when they looked at the appraisal price. 10 years ago when the original was done, that was a different point in time. So I'm just leaning on the expertise of those folks because that's what they do every day, and they've confirmed that 10,000 is still accurate. So,
Other questions from Ms. Howie? Commissioner Archer?
But I should point out that an appraisal is typically only good for 6 months, so you may want to recheck that. What did we pay for the land back in the day?
I would have to check.
Okay.
Yeah, that was acquired in 2007 or 8. So
I'm thinking we paid $4,000 or $5,000 an acre
That sounds
back
about
then. But yeah, it'd be nice to know what we paid for it.
Sure.
And how we're coming out. So,
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Councilman Brinson?
Thank you. Do you have any idea how much the extensions for the utilities will cost?
We have done some just rough estimates with past projects that have looked at extending utilities for the land that they would like to develop along 49th Street. And we're looking probably for both utilities, the gas and the sewer. Oh, gosh, I would hate to just blow.
Well, where I'm going
smoke at you,
is
but
the
it's-
sale of this going to be close enough to cover that?
It
Is
won't
there a
cover it.
substantial investment?
No, it won't cover it, but it will get us part of the way there, maybe a third of the way there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I apologize, I should have, Deputy Mayor
Oh,
Jensen.
that's fine.
Other questions or comments regarding this item?
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Archer,
Second.
second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Any other comments? Again, a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bueller?
Aye.
Commissioner Cook?
Aye.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item.
Item 5, action item, East Topeka Learning Center Project, New Markets Tax Credits.
Before we start on this item does contain items 5A through item 5J. And if we could have our counselor weigh in, do we need to approve each item individually, or can we approve them in whole?
I think you could do it both ways, but I would advise to approve them individually, just bring them up and approve them, and if anybody has, that gives anybody who has an opportunity to ask a question about any particular item. There may not be. I expect Mr. White's going to be so good in his presentation that he's going to eliminate all questions, but just in case.
All right, having set that bar, Mr. White, you're on.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jeff White with Columbia Capital, thanks for having me back. The item before you tonight is the approval of the JEDO portion of a new market tax credits transaction for the benefit of the East Topeka Learning Center project. JEDO is being asked to perform a specific function in this transaction along with a new nonprofit that will be the borrower in the transaction, and Go Topeka, which will be the sponsor of the transaction. So everybody has their part to play. The mayor asked for pictures last time I was here, so I brought pictures, I promise. But just to give you, again, a quick refresher, what are we talking about? The New Markets Tax Credits Program was created 17 or 18 years ago as a way to create incentives for private investment in what the statute defines as low-income communities. Low-income communities are census defined by census tract to census tract, and they are those that have high rates of unemployment, high rates of poverty, or low medium family incomes. The credit itself is generated over a 7-year period. It's 39% of the qualified investment, and it's paid 555-6666 in percentage, so think about it like a phone number. The structure of these, the tax credit investor buys the credits. They put the money in up front, so they typically don't pay $1 for $1 in tax credits. They're paying ahead of time, so they buy at a discounted value. And unlike other tax credit programs, the investor is really only interested in the return that they gain from the purchase of the tax credits themselves. There are no additional benefits such as depreciation or those kinds of things that they get. So the way this program works, Congress approves an allocation every year. This year it was $3.5 billion. The U.S. Treasury Department administers that allocation. That is project authority. Treasury then has an open application round for intermediaries called community development entities, or CDEs. Those folks make application in a highly competitive process. If they're awarded allocation, they then seek out projects like ours in which to make an investment. In the last round, there was something like $26 or $27 billion of applications for $3.5 billion of allocation. About 70 or 80 of these community development entities were funded around the country, and I would guess that somewhere around 200 or 225 projects got funded. So it is a highly competitive process, and we're really quite lucky to have the opportunity to have that money come here. So the parties involved, I mentioned that there are investors involved. These are typically commercial banks. You have to have an expectation of having taxable income for the next 7 years for these credits to make sense for you. It's really emerged into a situation where they're where commercial banks are the largest buyers of these credits. In the wake of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in December, we actually saw credit pricing decline by about 10%. So we're seeing credit pricing kind of in the 78 cents to 83 cent on the dollar range right now, but I do have a good news story about our particular pricing here. The sponsor in this case is GoTopeka. It's kind of the organization that is kind of corralling the herd and getting these projects from beginning to end. They're doing a great job in this case, although I'm sure Barbara would really rather prefer never to hear the acronym NMTC again. Community development entities, I mentioned a second ago, these are the intermediaries that win allocation from the Treasury Department and then look to place that in individual projects. Our CD in this case is Raza Development Fund, which is out of Phoenix. Qualified Active Low-Income Community Businesses, or QALC-Bs, these are the borrowers at the bottom. So we've created a new Kansas nonprofit to be the borrower at the bottom, and I'll show you the picture as we get there. And then the final role on this slide is the role we're asking JEDO to play, which is that of a leverage lender. And the leverage piece will make a little bit more sense as we go through this. So I'm going to build this transaction slide by slide. There's only 57 of them, so it should only, no, there. So we start at the top, where we bring in the tax credit equity from the investor. In this case, it's PNC Bank. My good news story is that PNC Bank is paying 90 cents on the dollar for these credits. Wow. So even though the market is 83, because of the kind of project, because of RDF's role as the CDE, they were willing to pay more for that. So the numbers here are roughly accurate at this point. We'll see some changes over the next week or so as we finalize. But roughly $2.3 million will come into the transaction from the investor. The investment fund in the middle is a single purpose entity that's created specifically for this transaction. So it's owned by the investor, was just created and exists only for the purpose of putting this structure together. And then on the right, you can see that the leverage lender is JEDO, bringing in $4.5 million and some change into the transaction. The 2.3 and the 4.5 get aggregated in the investment fund, and then the investment fund makes a qualified equity investment in a subsidiary community development entity. So again, Raza Development Fund is our CDE. They've created their own single purpose entity called a sub-CDE, subsidiary community development entity, specifically for this project. You can see that we leak some fees out, but $6.5 million is our qualified equity investment QEI. That is the tax credit basis. So when the investor is looking to earn those tax credits, it's 39% in total against that $6.5 million.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So just layman terms really quick
Yep.
for the folks at home that
Yeah.
are watching, and 90% for my brain.
Yes.
Yeah. So why is it so complicated to create so many legal entities that have to make the passing to the passing to the passing in order for you to get the new market tax credit?
This program is the absolute worst combination of the normal kind of accountability process you get with a federal grant, combined with all of the weirdness of federal tax law, combined with everything that's bad about commercial lending and real estate transactions and all those things, coupled with the idea that this really kind of looks like free money falling from the sky, and anything this complicated ends up with a cottage industry of lawyers and, frankly, consultants that have specialized expertise to put these together, and they're very expensive. So it is a very complicated, really kind of driven by tax law structure. So even though the program's been around for a long time, we have regulations. They're fairly unclear. There's not been any tax law rulings about these. So even today, 17 years into this program, you have lawyers that disagree about fundamental structuring parts of the conversation, and that can create challenges as you look to put these together. So it is a really inefficient subsidy, which is too bad.
Commissioner Archer?
Just going to say, I share your concern, Mayor, but I don't think there's going to be a quiz.
No,
Is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
But I think the question was, at a meeting or two ago, Commissioner Archer, you had a specific question about how much was being lost in fees, whether it's to the investment, the consultant, or the attorney, or the accountancy. We do lose quite a bit
That's dramatic.
in our fee structure, which is money that could have been applied to the project.
That's correct.
So along
Mayor?
those same comments, does this thing cost more money to operate than we're actually going to get?
No.
No.
So I buried the lead, but the net benefit of doing all this is that 1.25 million, actually hopefully a little bit north of that, will come into the project in the form of other people's money. Instead of $1.25 million in sales tax paid by Topeka sales taxpayers, it's going to come into the project
So out
from
of
everyone in the country.
6.5 million, we get 1.2 million?
No. 6.5 is the total amount of the aggregate of what JEDO has put forth, as well as the new market tax credit.
okay.
Right. That's
The,
right.
you have, from the new market tax credits, sorry, Jeff. help
It's
me.
2.3 is the
2.3.
gross that's
Okay.
paid in. And then by the time the 7 years runs and we've paid all the lawyers and the accountants and the consultants and the title company, and I'm missing 50 other people, the net would be roughly $1 million short of that.
So for Mr. Rencher's lead for tonight's paper, JEDO gives away $1.1 million.
Yeah, but we're funding jobs. At least.
Funding jobs, yes, funding educational programs can't be lost. But, yeah, the important part is that about 20% of this project's cost is coming from outside the community. I think at the end of the day, that's where it is. All right, let me keep plowing through so we can get to Mr. Archer's quiz, because I'm kind of excited to
I am too.
All right, so the sub-CDE then takes that $6.5 million, and it's going to make two loans to our borrower. And our borrower in this case, again, is a new Kansas nonprofit that was just created last week. Its sole purpose in the world is basically to support this project by owning the project, making sure that we're in compliance over the next 7 years with these new market regs, and contracting with Washburn to provide the services to create the jobs that the deputy mayor just talked about. So I put the little circles on this slide so you can kind of follow the money. So you'll notice there's an A loan, and that A loan corresponds with the amount of the leverage that came in. And there's a B loan, and the B loan corresponds with the gross amount of the tax credit equity minus that little bit of fees that comes off the top, and that leaves you with the $2 million that comes in with the B loan. The magic of this program is, at the end of the 7 years, what's going to happen is the investor in this project is going to come to you and they're going to say, JEDO, we're out of here. We're done. You own the investment fund. And what happens at that point is we can unwind the transaction and we can effectively make that $2 million loan evaporate. So that's the magic of this program, is that $2 million loan. The tax lawyers won't let me say forgiven, but it's forgiven. It goes away at the end of the 7 years. So one of the comments that came up last time is we're asking JEDO tonight to convey that property on Washington to this new entity. And I think, Mayor, you asked the question about accountability. So this new nonprofit will have a board, and one of those board seats will be the chair or the chair's designee of JEDO, so that we've got that accountability included on that going forward. All right, so we've funded at closing the Quality, the borrower at the bottom, this new nonprofit. We have 100% of the proceeds we need in hand to do everything you were planning to do anyways, to buy the land, which you've already done, so to reimburse the cost of the land, to fund construction of the project, which is already underway, to pay some fees along the way for new markets, and then to provide that operating subsidy to Washburn University so they can build the programming that we're all expecting to come out of this transaction. So at closing, 100% of the funds necessary to do all that will be on hand with the quality. And then finally, we get to the end where there's some additional details about a few other cash flows and some intricacies that come in and out. But fundamentally, again, the structure that's in place is one that will deliver roughly $1.25 million or more to the community from outside funds. These things really do unwind very simply. I've seen it done. My first three transactions that I've worked on new markets have now unwound. They do unwind as advertised, really without a whole lot of fanfare and without a whole lot of costs. So the transactions do work pretty well. So next steps, again, we've asked you tonight to consider a resolution which would authorize JEDO's involvement in the transaction. Again, primary role being that leverage lender role, bringing that sales tax money into the structure. The sales tax is sitting in the coffers of Go Topeka. We'll ask them to actually give that money back to you so you can make the payment. In fact, we probably will kind of skip the step and just have Go Topeka pay the money into the structure on your behalf if we can accommodate that. One of the other items on the agenda tonight is the termination of the three-party agreement between Washburn Go and JEDO. The reason we're asking you to terminate that is we'll have a new two-party agreement, a contract for services between the new Qualickby, the borrower at the bottom, and Washburn directly. That contract, we basically started with the lease that you'd already approved. We stripped out the lease stuff and turned it into a contract for services. It's been reviewed and substantively approved by Washburn. And then the option agreement is another one of the actions among the other real estate items on your transaction. And again, this gives JEDO the right at the end of the 7 years when the new markets transaction unwinds to determine what this body wants to do with that property. Whether JEDO owns it, whether you have Go Topeka own it, you'll have a contract in place with Washburn to continue to operate it at that point as the learning center. But fundamentally, you control the asset indirectly through the whole 7 years and directly at the end of the compliance period. We'll also be asking Go Topeka as the sponsor and this new nonprofit board to be taking actions to complete their components of the new markets transaction. And then we're working diligently over the next 6 or 7 business days here to get, you have 10 documents on your agenda tonight. We have 94 more that are included in the closing binder on this transaction to get resolved, and we're making steady progress along that. After closing, there is a bit of compliance that has to be done, but it's really mostly tracking things that you'd want tracked anyways. How many adults came through this center and got GEDs or got certificates in the programs being offered? How many people are we serving every year? How many jobs have we created indirectly through Washburn, directly through construction, those kinds of things? Really, the only way to kind of mess up compliance on a transaction like this is to pick up the building and move it outside of a qualified census tract. Pretty hard to do. The other would be to close the East Topeka Learning Center and open a packaged retail liquor store, a gambling casino, horse racing track, a golf course, and 1 or 2 other quote-unquote sin businesses. So as long as we continue to operate that facility for a non-sin activity, and we do it right there in East Topeka, we're going to be just fine on the compliance front. So again, just to kind of punctuate, very last bullet point on my slide is expected benefit continues to be north of $1.25 million from doing that. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to stand for any questions, unless I've just worn you down where it's not possible anymore.
Commissioner Archer, ready for your quiz?
When you said 94 more, we were relieved.
Can we go back to talk about the designee of the chair?
Yeah.
And so the chair would be then reporting back to JEDO as a whole as part of their responsibility as to what is happening with the new market tax credits? Is that correct?
Yes, and the Qualickby board, the borrower board, they'll have probably a couple meetings in the first 6 months or 8 months as the construction finishes up and we kind of get into the new markets phase. My experience with my other clients with similar structures is by the second year, it's meeting once a year, basically just to kind of get an update or whatever. And you're going to hear from Go Topeka staff, I'm sure, as that project opens, and you're getting updates regularly in this forum anyways. But there's really not much care and feeding that goes on with this transaction once it's closed.
And with the construction coming through the Shawnee County Commission, does that affect any of this organization?
Indirectly, so we'll have one more step in the payment, the ultimate payment process for construction, because our new markets lender will get a sign-off step on the approvals, but that really will work out in a reimbursement way, so the county's funding those payments and then submitting those for reimbursement. That reimbursement will have one more quick step where they're reviewing that same documentation that's already being provided.
Questions? Commissioner Archer?
So the reporting of results is, what, a formality as far as this program goes?
It's a contractual responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not, I wouldn't call it results, I would call it outputs, if you want to distinguish between outputs and outcomes, right? It's how many people went through, how many got degrees, what communities did they come from zip code-wise, things like that. You folks will have the harder determination about whether that effort has actually improved the community and job opportunities and those kinds of things. But the tracking of the outputs is something that I'm sure you would want in any event.
Oh, no,
this
I think
facility.
that's important.
Yeah.
My point is that results would jeopardize the
No.
new market tax credit in
No,
any way.
we have an obligation to report the results. We don't have an obligation to, we haven't said we will absolutely positively have 400 students. We've said that's an expectational goal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Madam Clerk, if we could start with item A.
Item A, JEDO Resolution 2018-2, a resolution authorizing the East Topeka Learning Center and the use of New Markets tax credits on the project.
Mr. Crowell, if you could give us a brief explanation.
I'll do this very briefly, and then if you have any questions beyond that, but simply put, this is the enabling resolution that enables this program, I'm going to call it a program, to go forward. It outlines the basic outline of the program. I want to note that the very last paragraph also authorizes the JEDO chair, if there are any documents that need a signature from the chair prior to closing of the transaction, you are authorizing the chair to sign those documents to go ahead and allow that transaction to be completed. We believe we've got the bulk of the main documents here that will need to be executed by JEDO, but if all of the army of attorneys and accountants decide that there may be something else that needs to be executed, the chair will be authorized and we won't have to come back as a full board to do that.
Any questions from Mr. Crowell regarding this item? Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Deputy Mayor Jensen, motion.
To approve?
Is there a second? Second by Mayor Del Isla. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Passes. Item B.
Item B, deed Kansas warranties statutory from JEDO to Go Topeka, East Topeka Learning Center Support Corporation.
This is simply the deed. JEDO owns the property that the project's located on currently. This deed will transfer that property to the new East Topeka Learning Center Corporation, the nonprofit corporation that Mr. White described as part of the project.
Any questions for this item?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Archer, second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. That passes. Our next item.
Item C, commitment for title insurance.
This is, like you've seen if you've ever bought or sold property, there is title insurance on this transaction, and they are asking JEDO as the owner to sign the commitment for the title insurance for this transaction as well.
Any questions regarding this item? Is there a motion? Motion made by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Second.
Second.
Second by Mayor Del Isla. Any further questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. That item passes. Our next item.
Item D, JEDO contract C 2018-1, termination agreement by and among JEDO, Go Topeka, and Washburn University, termination of JEDO contract number C 2017-3.
This is the contract terminating the prior contract, the three-party contract that Mr. White mentioned with Washburn University, JEDO, and Go Topeka. Now it will be a two-party contract between Washburn University and the new corporate entity for educational services.
Do we have any indication that this will be not signed by Washburn University?
It's my understanding that the legal counsel for Washburn University has approved the form of this agreement, and so it's ready to move forward.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the motion? Made by Mayor Del Isla, second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That item passes. Our next item.
Item E, JEDO Contract C 2018-2, option agreement between JEDO and PNC New Markets Investment Partners LLC.
And Mr. White, correct me if I misspeak, but my understanding is this is the document when the transaction is completed after the 7 years. This is the document that allows the transaction to collapse and puts the property back under control of JEDO.
Any questions regarding this item? Is there a motion? Motion made by Commissioner Bueller. Is there a second? Second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Any further discussion? Councilman Ortiz.
I don't know if this is a proper time, but who ensures it, why all this is going on? And the reason I asked, I was at an NIA meeting and in the minutes that they said there was some equipment stolen. And I thought that was in the 100 block. So with all this transaction going on, I'm hoping we're insured somewhere. I mean, because, like a new car, this person's responsible and.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Ortiz, the Washburn will be required to secure property and casualty insurance for the property. And yes, I understand the contractor had some tools stolen, unfortunately, as well.
And that was just, and I apologize if this isn't the right time, but it is a big concern to me because they're still building over there.
Yes.
And that just kind of stuck out, and of course, we don't want that. We want, and I know it happens everywhere, but that was just a concern. Thank you.
So, any other questions regarding the item? Is there a motion? Motion made by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Lesser. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes. Our next item.
Item F, JEDO Contract C 2018-3, certification regarding debarment, suspension, ineligibility, and voluntary exclusion, lower tier covered transactions.
This document is JEDO's certification that JEDO as an entity has not been barred from participating in federal programs. If you'll note, from time to time, contractors will get in trouble with the federal government, and as part of the punishment for violating the rules of participating in federal programs, they can actually be debarred or prohibited from participating further. This is our certification to the other parties in the transaction that we have not been debarred.
Any questions regarding this item? Is there a motion?
Make a motion?
Motion made by Mayor Del Isla, second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Any other questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes. Our next item.
Item G, JEDO Contract C 2018-4, forbearance agreement leverage loan.
I'm going to be brief on this. This is one of the loan documents for the transaction, for the loan that we're making.
Any further questions regarding this item? Is there a motion to approve this item? Motion to approve by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Is there a second? Second by Mayor De La Isla. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion passes. Our next item.
Item H, JEDO Contract C 2018-5, loan and security agreement leverage loan.
And this is number 2 of one of the loan documents, for the transaction.
Any questions regarding this document?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Archer, second by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Any further questions regarding this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion passes. Our next item.
Item I, JEDO Contract C 2018-6, promissory note, leverage loan.
And this is the promissory note for the loan. If you'll- Everybody who's taken out loans and purchased property will note that there's a loan and there's a note, and this one's no different.
Any questions regarding the promissory note? Is there a motion to approve it? Motion made to approve by Deputy Mayor Jensen. Is there a second? Second by Mayor Dellett Isla. Any further questions or comments regarding this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Our next item.
Item J, JEDO Contract C 2018-7, reimbursement and compliance agreement.
My best explanation for this one is, we're familiar with how funds flow between JEDO and Go Topeka because we work with that every quarter in our meetings. But to outside parties, it may be a little bit confusing as to who JEDO is and who Go Topeka is and where does the money come from and where does it go. This document outlines the flow of funds between the two entities. Is that a decent? Mr. White's nodding his head. That's what it is.
Any other questions regarding this document? Is there a motion to approve by Mayor Del Isla, second by Deputy Mayor Jensen? Any further questions regarding this document? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Commissioner Archer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was kidding about the quiz, obviously, but Jeff seems to be really the only person that is thoroughly familiar with this process. But I wanted to ask our county counselor if he's confident in this and if there are any misgivings on your part as far as JEDO moving forward with this agreement.
I think Mr. White and I discussed just a little bit ago that it's a bit of a leap of faith, but I've spoken with him, met with him a couple of times. We have a weekly conference call at 11 a.m. on Friday morning where we go through the list of the outstanding documents, and all parties have an opportunity to discuss the transaction, open questions, how this is going to work. And so I've had an opportunity to sit in, watch it evolve to the point that we are at now. So I'm comfortable in recommending if we're going to take this route, then these are the documents that we need to execute to make it happen.
Thank you, County Councilor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments before we depart from this item? Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to, at this point in time, respond to Councilwoman Ortiz's question. I can tell you that the Champion Builders does carry a builder's risk on the policy, which it covers all the materials as well as the new construction of the project, as well as there is a policy as well enforced on the existing structure in the event that there was a fire, a tornado, and so forth. So yes, there's adequate coverage in place. The only other thing I would want to bring to the chairman's attention, and I had not felt or thought about this until this point in time, but my company had written the insurance prior to me being elected, prior to me, being on that. If you feel that it's in the best interest that I would abstain from any of the votes in regards to any of those type of things, I would be happy to do so. But I did feel that I needed to bring it to the attention that I did have my company did have a business. Wrote the insurance for that prior to being elected, prior to any of those points in time.
Okay. I don't see any direct conflicts, but looking to our county counselor.
The issue has been disclosed. I don't see a need for him to recuse himself in this process.
Okay. If you feel the need to recuse, obviously you could do so, but we'll rely on the advice of our county counselor at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Pillar.
I just have an overall comment, getting back from all this business for a moment. I don't know how many people are on various Facebook feeds, but it has really been fun to see the progress reports of the actual construction of the building and the excitement of the East Topeka Council. They've been meeting regularly. This is, the goal of getting this whole project involved was to engage, have a presence in East Topeka, to engage folks in East Topeka in the planning and the development of this, and then to see it happen. And on a day-to-day basis, that's really been going well. So,
Barbara, would you be able to step forward and just, if you are able to, I know that there's been some work done, but just briefly, kind of how the construction project is going?
Well, it's going really well, and I would challenge you to drive by on 21st Street between Washington and Indiana Avenues. You'll see that much of the demolition is complete.
it doesn't look the same.
It does not look the same. Washburn Tech has their trailer that's out there right out front in terms of, promoting it that way, and it's a pretty impressive site so far. Percentages related to completion, I don't have, of course, the most recent reports for this week. We're in the middle of the week, but we had our meeting earlier today, and things are moving forward. We were talking about the shell that will go on, and they're putting, that primer on and starting that. So lots of movement forward that way, and still on target and still under budget. And so that's the briefest I can be on that. Thanks.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Thank you. I drive by there almost every day. It's on my way home. Well, I make it on my way home. Why are we keeping that one? I think it's cool, but can you explain that?
Well, if the slide could pull up, I don't know if they can pull up the slide that's on the screen right now, you'll be able to see there's going to be intent for signage. They're not going to pull up the slide, sorry. There we go. So this is a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. It's more of a sketch or a drawing, but you'll see that tower, it says tech, and so there'll be signage, it will be lit, and so it's part of that beacon of education that you'll see once it's complete.
Beacon of education.
All right.
I just said it for the first time.
In District 3.
In District 3.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like, it's a great project, great activity in East Topeka, but I would like to say thank you to the County Counselor's Office. I know this has been a huge amount of work, additional work for you, so I appreciate that. And thank you to Jeff as well for your explanation.
And one thing I would add is that I've confirmed with Jeff, he's with us for the long term.
Good deal.
If we ever have questions, Commissioner Archer, we have the ability to reach out to him. He doesn't drop off after we close on this, so I was pleased to hear that.
Good.
When we have our next JEDO meeting, if we could maybe put on the agenda a report maybe from Washburn on how recruiting is going, again, we're looking at a building that's going to have its doors open at the end of this year, beginning of next year, with programming starting in January of 2019. So maybe some updates from Washburn University as to how their recruiting is going, because it's, again, exciting for East Topeka, it's exciting for Topeka in general. So, and I just looking at Ms. Mazurek in the audience, just knowing she's shaking her head up and down that they'll have that for us. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, our next item.
Item 6, discussion with possible action, Community Broadband Task Force.
And actually, I'm going to introduce that, so this was perfect. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to hear from the Broadband Subcommittee again. I want to make sure that you know that Go Topeka continues to be very supportive of a broadband initiative and recognizes that economic development, entrepreneurship, and workforce development all directly align with broadband efforts. And we believe it's very important, and it's part of the strategy that we have moving forward in the community and ultimately the inclusive prosperity that we're seeking for our community. Deputy Mayor Brendan Jensen is actually part of our subcommittee now, and will actually be giving the update for this evening.
Yes.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Jensen, if you
Good evening,
could.
ladies and gentlemen. I know it's a little unusual for a member of the body to give a report, but I felt it was critical to come to you as one of your colleagues and share my experience with it. As many as you know, I was rather hard on those folks at our last meeting. It was not going in the direction that I felt it needed to, and so I voiced my opinion, and later that evening talked with Jean a little bit, and she encouraged me to come and meet with him the next day while the Telshin folks were still in town. And they met with me for 2 hours, right out of nowhere, carved out their schedules and sat down and really went through an in-depth review of where they had been, where they thought they were going, talked to me about, the issues that I had thought the body had. And I really want to start off my report by thanking them for, really just being available and saying, look, if you're not happy, let's work together. Let's see what we can do to solve this problem. They welcomed me as advisor almost right away. And I was particularly impressed with how quick they were willing to pull me in and let me be part of that. So I really want to thank the team for allowing me to do that. The consultants, Tilson, I mean, when we sat down and talked to them, I never once have heard the phrase, that's out of scope. We have changed the direction in a number of ways, which I'll describe in just a moment. And in every single time where we came back to them and said, I think we should do it differently, they said, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And they pushed back in a couple of areas where I was crazy, which is entirely required. But at the end of the day, I think what we have is really moving in a great direction. Right out of the gate, we talked about the immediate need for private sector input to try and make sure that we were leveraging the resources our community already has and the investment that the private sector has put in there. So I reached out to a number of the incumbents right away and scheduled just some one-on-one meetings to sort of get a feel for their frustrations with the process and where they thought we needed to be going and how we could better work together. And so I took that back to the team, and essentially what we decided was, indeed, we really do need a bit of a shift in focus. So what we're doing now is we're having a broadband summit. We've got 5 meetings scheduled now with incumbent providers and other folks that are really interested in bringing infrastructure to our community. They're scheduled for the end of June. We're looking at how we can really leverage shot-in-the-arm type incentives. So basically one hits that will get something moving along as opposed to a reoccurring subsidy that would have to get paid again and again. So we're talking about how we can basically take an existing schedule that might be there and accelerate it. We want to get this stuff in the hands of our community faster. This is really coalesced into 2 main areas. If we talk about the areas of our community that don't have good access to coverage, and for the most part, that's going to fall into many areas of the county where they simply can't get good, high-quality, stable, reliable broadband. The other part of this, though, is access to affordable service in parts of the community where we do have good coverage, where folks either can't afford it or there's limitations where, for whatever reason, they're not getting it. So we're trying to solve, at the end of the day, these 2 problems as far as we've gone so far. So to help us do that, we're developing a set of community goals that are based in part on the FCC's goals for communities, but we're trying to tailor those more to what our community's needs and wants are. And that's really going to give us sort of 2 sets of numbers. What numbers, what speeds, what capacity can we expect to deliver in rural Shawnee County versus what can we deliver within, the city limits, where there's the density of infrastructure, that sort of thing. So our next real phase in this at this point is to go to the RFI process. We're meeting with the local incumbents here and some of the local folks just to sort out, what are they capable of doing? The last thing we want to do is kick out an RFP several months down the road that's asking vendors to accomplish impossible feats. That's not going to help us move the needle. If we say, we want you to deliver something there's no way you can actually build, we're not going to be successful at that. So these meetings we're putting together are going to help us create realistic goals for the community, and we're hoping to come up with some rough costs on that. So what is it really going to take to move the needle in the community? How much will that cost? And are there other barriers that are not financially related? I mean, is it simply you need access to a certain amount of right-of-way to lay fiber to set up a tower for Wi-Fi? So we're trying to sort out exactly what incentives are appropriate to help move the needle in our community. And then we'll take all of that information, pack it up into an RFI, and kick it out, and that will cast a substantially wider net than we all have time to meet with. So the goal is to reach out to anybody and everybody that wants to participate and ask them to provide some feedback. That feedback then will be the driver in our conversation of what this body feels financial incentives would be or other incentives, and then whether or not we're ready to go out to RFP and actually ask people to deliver that. I've tried to sort of align the scheduling with that, with Momentum 2022, in that if we do an RFP process, we would expect it to be sometime early next year in 2019, and that would give us that year to sort of get the RFPs out, get the responses back in, and would give them 2020 and 2021 to build infrastructure. And then as our community sort of comes online in 2022 with all these exciting amenities and all the exciting things that are coming along, this would be part of that. So with that, I'll be delighted to answer any questions you may have.
If we could, just to make sure that we're on track. When Tilson was here last, they gave us a report
Yes.
that outlined that the cost of the JEDO taking on broadband by themselves was simply unattainable.
That's right.
And the request for information would be an opportunity to partner with all of our providers or potential providers for them to come to us and give us an outline of what services they could provide or what their needs would be.
Yes, absolutely.
And then from there, we would develop a plan of action.
Well, yes, the next step would be to talk about whether or not we can afford what we think would need to be done in order to move the needle. And so part of the reason why we're sitting down with all of the incumbent carriers is to have that brainstorming session. The Tilson folks are coming back in town to have those meetings with us, and it's very much going to be a team effort to sit down and brainstorm how do we affect change in the community. And then from there, the RFP process, or RFI process is taking that concept but casting a wider net, throwing it out to all the folks that want to participate, including the ones that either aren't in the area or that we simply couldn't schedule meetings with.
You identified that there were two needs. One was advancing infrastructure to the rural community or areas that do not have it. And the second is expanding broadband usage to those areas that do have it.
Correct.
Through the RFI, I can understand how we would expand service to areas that don't have it. But how does the RFI address the second part, which is enabling service to those that maybe already have the service?
Well, so part of what we need to discover is why isn't there good uptake in that? Is it simply that there's no dollars for marketing? Is that, in some cases, if you've had an outstanding bill with one of the incumbent carriers for a certain period of time, you're not allowed to buy that coverage until that bill is either paid off or a certain period of time elapses. So as we ask the questions to the carriers that provide those services, tell us why this program you have in place isn't working. What are your barriers to do that? And one of the things is to ask the school systems, as you advertise these to the parents of families, what are the barriers that are causing them not to sign up for that service? And then the other part of that is there a different option to provide access to low-income areas and areas that don't have good access to service beyond just the existing programs?
Mr. Lazone-Graves recently shared a very good article about how there's a lack of broadband that's actually being used in areas that does have access to broadband. So addressing that issue, and I want to thank Mr. Graves for providing that article to the board.
Yeah, and he and I have sat down and discussed that at length, and probably will do so again as we move toward the process. So he's been instrumental in helping us at least look at that particular aspect.
Other questions for Mr. Jensen? Councilman Hillard.
Right along those lines, I know that I received the article from Mr. Grays and haven't read it yet. And I'm seeing it pop, on the city council anyway, we get, one way or another, we're on a variety of listservs, and so articles and conferences are addressing this. Do we have anybody on the staff or on the board that is watching those as they come in? This is really cutting edge development, and other communities are looking at this like we are. I just wondered if anybody's watching the publications as they're coming through.
Well, for the most part, I do, just because that's the industry that I'm employed in.
Okay.
So,
Just didn't want us to miss.
yes, and that's part of what we're leaning on the consultants as well for,
Okay.
is to take a look at emerging technology and say, is this a good idea for our community, is it not? And, the private incumbents.
But
So,
did some other community already figure out this matrix?
Yeah.
And thank you.
Did you factor into, and the committee discussed that this year's chamber meeting is to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chattanooga has a great history with expanding broadband, expanding network coverage. They've also a lot of successes, a lot of failures,
Yes.
bumps in the roads.
Yeah.
As they factor that into your discussion.
I'm particularly excited to travel to there and talk to their people and see what their successes were, what their failures were, and how we can learn from that. Absolutely. So, excellent. Any other questions I can ask?
Commissioner Archer.
I was just going to say thank you. pretty much sounds like you're taking over this project and making it happen.
Well, I don't know that I would go that far. I have an incredible team that's been willing to take me into their arms and help guide us through this process. But this is very much a team effort. It's been my pleasure to get involved and do what I can to help move this
Well,
forward.
but because of your expertise, I think things are moving forward. And again, it's a lot of work, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
I really do. Thank you.
I do want to take a moment and recognize Commissioner Bueller, Mayor Wolgast, Gina. You have been working on this project for almost 5 years. Broadband is a 5-year project to get it to this point, so we would be remiss if we did not thank you, Commissioner Bueller and Gina, as a young, just fresh commissioner coming to the community meetings to discuss broadband as you took up that mantle.
I do want to point out, the project team is the designee from JEDO. So, and it's my understanding, we had a representative from the county, a representative from the city that we no longer have as the IT staff. We do have a representative from the library, and we have a representative from one of our rural school districts, and then we have Go Topeka. So if it's the intention of the councilman to take the place of the IT staff on that project team, I still think there is benefit to that project team being the designee for JEDO, because we do have broad representation from all parties on that project team.
And if I could comment, we've discussed that in the committee. It's not appropriate for me to take on that role because once we get to the RFP process, I will need to step back as a voting member. That's a conflict of interest. However, we've had extensive conversations with the city manager, and he has agreed to return a committee member to that at the appropriate point in time. So there will be representation from the city once we get back into that phase.
I think that would be important.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And it's
Yes.
unfortunate that we don't have representation from the IT
Yes, so-
department at the city, so.
Yeah. So if there are no other questions, we have 2 asks from you all this evening. We would like to request permission to move on with the RFI process and actually issue that. Our next update would then be to bring back the information we got from the RFI, as well as an explanation of that, so that we can then really have the conversation about what incentives do we want to do? You know, what's the, and it's going to be a dollar amount. It's also going to be, you know, are there barriers that we need to tear down as the local government? So with that, we would be interested in moving that ahead. We would also be interested in having a couple of folks who would be willing to look over the actual RFI before it's sent out and just provide comments and feedback. One of the most important things is to make sure that this body's questions are answered when that information comes back in.
I think at this time, if we could, Madam Clerk, read item 6B. I think we're to that point.
Item 6B, authorization for continued outreach to broadband service providers, including interviews and development of an RFI to collect provider on potential solutions to meet the broadband goals of the city of Topeka and Shawnee County.
Mayor Del Isla.
Make a motion?
Motion made by Mayor Del Isla. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Padilla. Any further discussion on this item? Okay. All in favor of the item, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. Now, if we could have the next item.
Item 6C, request to designate one or more JEDO members to review a draft RFI and provide feedback to the project team prior to the September JEDO board meeting.
On this item, I believe that it would be important to have both representation from the city and the county as we move forward. Deputy Mayor Jensen, would you be willing to serve in that capacity?
Absolutely.
And Commissioner Bueller, since you have had the most experience with this item, would you be willing to serve as the designee for the county?
Yes.
Okay. I would then make a motion to designate Deputy Mayor Jensen and Commissioner Bueller as the JEDO members to review and draft the request for information and providing feedback to the project team.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, second by Deputy Mayor Del Isla. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That item passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item.
Item 8, public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment, Carol Marshall.
Thank you very much. This was an interesting meeting. I just wanted to say I think we need to give a big shout out to Topeka on Project Arrow. And I myself would like to think that the improvements that are being made on 49th Street had played a part in the decision of the company to want to build on the land or buy the land. And I was just listening, and so maybe I'm wrong on this, but if Topeka is directly negotiating with the company for the land, actually we'll make a little bit more money because we won't be paying a realtor. So we might get a little, you could look at it that we are making a little more than $10,000 an acre. But I just see this as a tremendous win-win, that somebody wants to build on this land, we're going to have new construction and a new business. So, and I didn't want you not to have any public comment.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board? Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you. I wanted to bring something to the board. I was working with a friend, or having lunch with a friend, and let me start here. I went to Amigo to take my grandkids down there, and all the way down there I seen Wizard of Oz, you know, the museum. So, you know, it got you excited before you got there. And I had lunch with a friend, and we talked about the Wanamaker corridor. And so as I was leaving my house yesterday to go to say farewell to the sea lions at the zoo, I looked at all the out-of-state cars that come through I-70. There was Atlanta, there was Florida, Colorado, and a friend of mine that used to work at Best Buy, and he was telling me, he said, people don't know about what's on Wanamaker. It's terrible. I don't think the mall has done a great job at selling that, and I think maybe JEDO should get involved. And maybe we should buy some billboards that would pay for themselves. From Manhattan to Topeka, from you know, Kansas City to Topeka. How many people pass through and they don't know? They know you can get off and get gas. But there's all those extra things that we need to sell. And I would like to see us do that, to get some billboards to sell that or work on that. Because I don't think we're doing ourselves any justice by just letting them pass through. So many times, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm traveling, I want to get out and walk, I want to get out and shop, I want to get out and see what's out there. And just coming through doesn't do us any justice at all, unless you're going to the show, you know. But anyway, just some thoughts. I wanted to throw that out there, and I'll stand for any questions.
I think those are some good comments, but I also think that, you know, Mr. Otting with Visit Topeka has weighed in a lot. They do a lot of advertising. I know that I can't hardly watch the TV without seeing about Topeka in the commercial that was provided. It gives an exciting look to Topeka, and so, but I think those are some good comments that, you know, I pass on to Mr. Otting as well.
But it doesn't talk about Wanamaker.
Right.
It talks about our functions, but it doesn't talk about the corridor.
Right. I agree. Neither Deli Salib?
The only other comment that I would say is, welcome back, Jackie. It's nice to have you here. We missed you.
Any other discussions? To remind everybody, Madam Clerk, our next meetings?
Wednesday, September 12th, and Wednesday, December 12th.
Unless Molly or Barbara brings more incentives to us before then. So, any other items for the board? Seeing none, we are adjourned.